Today we meet Julie Brown, co-founder and dynamic force behind Polar Circles, whose vast polar expeditions have shaped riveting tales and insights for both adventure seekers and corporate minds, all while seamlessly merging her roles as an explorer, writer, guide, and family member. Julie, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure and a privilege to have you here today.
Thank you, Brad. It's great to be with you again. It's nice to see you again.
Absolutely. So perhaps for people who haven't met you before, you could just share a little bit about who you are and what you've been up to in recent months.
So my name is Julie Brown, and I have actually two roles within my company. I run a polar guiding business, let's say, with 7 polar guides, taking sportive tourists to the polar regions in the most ecological way possible, taking them to places that, from what we now know over many, many years of doing this, changes lives and has very strong impact. And on the other side, I'm a speaker and a writer and a consultant, and that's pretty much what I do professionally. The last few months since we spoke, I'm still evolving on this new path since my husband and business partner passed away in 2021. So it's an interesting journey, to say the least, and one that is fascinating in all of the facets of life, this beautiful spectrum of a thing called life.
I'm interested to hear your thoughts on perseverance, particularly in the context of your own experience, maybe what you've learned from the polar experience, and also just in terms of your own adversities and challenges.
The first thing that comes to mind is humility. I think humility is my guiding force, because I've known from the very beginning of my current situation that I'm not alone. As we all know in these times, I'm definitely not alone. There are many people this morning waking up to adversity probably even more difficult than my own. So I think perseverance comes with the starting point of staying humble, of the awareness of realizing that I'm probably still, even in the midst of it all, one of the lucky ones, and finding a way to move forward realistically, even though I know that it's not the optimal situation, but still trying to find a way to carve a path forward or sideways or whatever direction I'm going that day, and learning to be satisfied maybe with steps that before felt like baby steps and today feel like giant footprints. So there's a lot of perspective that goes with perseverance, and a lot of humility.
Humility is an interesting starting point, and I think an important one, because sometimes I guess we've got a grand goal and we feel like giving up is just not an option, and we've got to push ourselves to burnout. I guess in the context of a polar expedition, burnout is catastrophic. So small steps are better than, being a hero.
Absolutely. And the best people out on the ice are the humble adventurers. The types of adventurers who make the media, often we'll see people who have, I would call it an over-the-top personality. The people who I pay attention to and my colleagues who I trust pay attention to tend to be the quieter ones, tend to be the people who don't need to brag about everything that they've done, but who we know are able to accomplish really intense things without being wrapped up in the accomplishment, if that makes sense. So the goal, which is often in the polar regions, I would say these are goals that reach Olympic levels of sportive accomplishment, and Herculean levels of mental accomplishments. These people achieve these things without needing to talk about them, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to be the people who put themselves out there and, as you say, very, very carefully take a bite of adventure at a time.
I like that. Take a bite of adventure at a time. It's almost like you see people who maybe put themselves through some sort of challenge, climb to the top of a small-ish mountain simply to get the photo, to get the selfie. And I guess those who do the truly extreme feats, who get out there on the ice into these incredibly hostile environments, they're not there to take a selfie. They're there to help others experience it and get home safely.
Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to document what you did. I don't want to sound like a hypocrite. It's important to celebrate what we accomplish. But what I'm trying to say is in the moments of achieving those accomplishments, the people who tend to, one, survive and come back unscathed and find themselves able to go back out and do it again, tend to be the people who very naturally absorb what they've done. They incorporate that accomplishment into a much wider lifestyle. And I'm not talking about accidents like what happened with Dixie. These are different stories. An accident is an accident, and we all know people who've had them. I'm more speaking about people who take steps that we know are risky and put others at risk. That's just something that never really gels with what I was out there to do in the adventure. Help others do even more.
Okay. How about innovation from your perspective? I think on a personal level, I've recently been challenged to innovate an organization. Innovation seems to come naturally to me. I'm always looking at ways to improve what we're doing, improve how we do things, whether it's running a workshop, whether it's a brochure, whether it's a tool or an application. What are your thoughts on innovation?
Well, I find innovation to be the oxygen of what I call a fulfilling life. There's something so mesmerizing about knowing we've created something that maybe didn't exist before, or perhaps ameliorated something that existed before but took it into a new place. It gives a person a sense of satisfaction like very few other accomplishments. That said, innovation runs hand in hand with infatuation. And I know that there's something about first loves, first experiences that create a rush. They give us a bit of an endorphin boost. And innovation to me almost needs a new word, because as we're innovating, we also have to stick with the process of allowing whatever it is we innovated not only to incubate, but then to take its own path. And we lose in that space of the work time, the monotony of the hard work. The infatuation, of course, goes away, like in anything. So innovation, the moment of innovating, or the very short-term process of the creation of an entity, to me is just one small step in making something grand come to fruition.
It's important to be aware of that line between innovation and infatuation, because I see that in myself as well, in that if you're always trying to create something new, you never really finish or do something else well.
Well, you can. I find, and also I can sense what you create. There's a passion behind what you do, and that's where people click. Is that idea that you want to innovate? I sense, and I want to innovate, but we also have something deeper behind that, and that depth is what I believe keeps innovators going. And I believe also that idea of knowing. There's sometimes that gut feeling of knowing that what you're about to do is important, or may have an impact that's important. And so I do believe that innovation also goes hand in hand with that sort of gut feeling that tells us, let's try this. Let's try this. And there's a sense of daring. We're not afraid. People who want to get out there, especially Dixie, when I say we, Dixie was an innovator through song. It was in his blood, and a pioneer. And to be able to live next to that and work next to that and feel the drive that came from what he wanted to create in this world was very privileged, a very privileged place to be.
Yeah. Yeah, to see that unfold in real time must have been an incredible experience. Where does your creative inspiration come from? And just from life's experience, what are your thoughts about creative inspiration?
There's something about finding out that life requires creative inspiration. There's again, humility factor that comes into play when a person is faced with needing to create a new life. Meaning, I have this one life that I know of on this spectrum, but there are paths that we carve, and suddenly those paths hit a roadblock, or the path just fades away, and we have to create a new path. And creative inspiration to me has taken on a whole new level. It's, as you say, it's sometimes professional, because everything in my life changed so much in 2021. So it was personal, it was professional, spiritual, of course. We take a new look at things. And I believe that creative inspiration for me has taken on a much more reverent meaning. I'm privileged, and I'm lucky that I have this network of humans around me who I didn't even know some of them existed, who have encouraged and supported and given me examples of what creative inspiration can be. A small example, and timely, this week I just lost a very dear friend, actually the mother of my very best friend when I was a young girl, who lived into her 90s, Marge. And Marge is someone who, as a young girl going into her house, especially as a teenager, I probably blew past Marge and went straight to her refrigerator or into her daughter's bedroom to talk. She was this presence, a stable presence in my life growing up. And then I only probably truly realized this week, this woman was an epitome of creative inspiration and of perseverance and of resilience. She went through so many life experiences in her more than 9 decades. And she just did it with this wonderful sense of humor, an energy that is difficult to even emulate. It was an energy that involved singing and laughing, and she had an infectious giggle. And I realized this week, of course, as we honor her life in the moment of her passing, what a lucky person I was to have her in my life all these years. Just not saying what she was doing, but doing what she was doing.
That's real inspiration, isn't it? I mean, people like that who are just doing what they do. It reminds me of my grandmother, who I saw in South Africa last week. She's 92. She still looks like the Queen. She's just perfect and fit and well and walks and speaks beautifully. And the same thing, I never really noticed it until later on in my life, where I realized, wow, that is the model of well-being, and that is the model of practicing walking the talk and actually being a guiding light. without you realizing that she was ever there. It's in that way as a model. Interesting. Do you think that there is such a thing as a muse, or do you think that creative inspiration comes from work?
Personally, creative inspiration for me comes predominantly in natural settings. I'm highly tuned in, probably because of my work, but I'm highly tuned into the sheer miracle of what's happening around me in nature. Muses, what little I know about art history and the art world, I find a muse to be sometimes a bit of a frightening word. It tends to have a power play, perhaps.
Yeah.
Mentors, of course, we all have mentors and heroes. For me, my own personal experience, I tend to be highly motivated by people who accomplish things that seem impossible. Like anyone, I suppose we're all enthralled by mere humans who go out there and accomplish things that are so grand. But it's more like your grandmother or like Marge. I'm starting to realize it's the people who can combine the longevity of accomplishment, the sheer determination to keep it all together and keep it going. Excuse me. To me, that's these are the people I tune into, and then nature. There are just certain experiences that I've had in life where nature to me puts it all into the pure perspective, and of course it makes me feel like this grain of sand or smaller than a grain of sand. But I do believe that inspiration and the idea of wanting to accomplish not necessarily more, but perhaps leave something behind. I don't know what yet. Leave something behind on this side of whatever realm we're on. That to me is my guiding purpose. And for the rest, enjoying what comes my way. Tuning in. I think that's a very important thing. You know, it's wonderful talking with you because of our time zone differences. So for me right now, it's the wee hours of the morning, and it's still very dark, and it's quite cool outside today, and nice, beautiful autumn weather. And it's that tuning in, what's happening around me, what will unfold when the light comes up. There's a beauty of awakening and capturing in those first few moments of eyes opening and the breath returning to a more active state of the day, of just being aware what's happening outside my window, what's happening outside my door, what's happening in the world. Which, just for example, last night there was something very upsetting that happened when I went to bed, and I didn't know how it unfolded, but I knew I had no immediate danger in my area here, so I chose to sleep. I needed sleep. I knew if I had better sleep, I'd be a better person today. And so there are situations that happen, like here in Brussels last night, with an unexpected violent attack in a football stadium full of people unsure. There's war. There's injustice. All of these things are happening. There are acronyms now about how volatile our world is, and how we're all supposed to be in an era that is being told to us is unusual. But if we study history, we're not the first generations to have to face volatile times and uncertain times.
Yeah.
And I just believe when we can come together and start with that point of awareness, where are we? What's happening? How did we get here? And most importantly, how can we all together move forward?
I really like what you said about nature as inspiration, and I think this is a missing piece in so many people's lives, is they've disconnected from the natural environment. And it doesn't have to be an extreme, deep in a forest or rowing on a wild rapid, it can be the simplest things, just finding some green space. I mean, I always think about what Alan Watts said, we're not born into this world, we emerge from it. Just like an apple tree produces apples, our planet produces people. And many people have forgotten that they come from the planet. So go and spend some time there, and maybe that will even encourage nature stewardship. That's what I'm thinking.
Absolutely. There's a sensual. Just today, I was walking in the forest with my friend. We do this 2-hour walk on Mondays. We started it in the last couple of years, and it's been it's just a wonderful thing to look forward to at the start of a work week, to make time. Instead of taking a lunch break, I save it, and then I make time for this walk. And yesterday, because it's the early cold now starting, there are these smells that start happening. Cool, damp air. There are these wonderful smells that start coming up, feet punching through the leaves. It's just magical. And it's like you say, I don't need to be in Antarctica. I don't need to be up in the high Arctic or in Greenland or wherever. It's tuning in and not being, how can I say that? I don't want to sound contagiously positive in a way that sounds unrealistic. There's a very realistic positivity to how I'm living my life. Because I'm choosing to see the good that I can doesn't mean that I ignore that there are things that are difficult. But there's also so much good that they don't cancel each other out. We can coexist with the difficulty and also look for the joys and look for the things that create wonder. We're missing wonder, in my humble opinion.
You're so right. And there's a recent book which someone told me about called Awe, AWE, and it basically says that one of the things we're really missing out on is just that feeling of wonder, of awe, and it doesn't have to be from grandiose experiences. It can be as simple as watching a sunset. Or looking at some flowers. I mean, it's all around us if you just take some time out. Yeah, I'd love to hear more.
Yes, and I think
from your perspective, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I was thinking, it sounds so lovely. I was able to take time and walk in the forest, and we're talking about the beauty of nature. And then I'm trying to also be realistic. Is there someone right now listening to us who's using a lunch hour for some inspiration and in an office building where nature is pretty far away? It's things like putting a plant nearby or creating things that remind us even of nature. It's shocking what just a photo. I read that recently, and I would like to remember the source, that we get the same endorphin release from looking at a photo of beautiful nature than from being in it. And that's fascinating to me, that we can create, when we're stuck, we can still create wonderful imagery, even if it's imaginative, that can bring us back to a place of performance or non-performance. Dixie for decades would take with him on the ice, because every gram of weight counts, because you're taking it with you. You mentioned flying to South Africa. How often have we just had carry-on bags that feel like they're weighing much more than they did when we first picked them up? Well, in his sled, he allowed himself one book, his inspiration book. And it was usually one of those moleskin type books. Yeah. And he would spend months before he left giving it to people and say, write in this or tape something in this. Give me things that I can, when times get tough after the first 2 weeks of an expedition, something that will take my mind somewhere else. He loved humor, so quite often there'd be jokes in there that probably weren't very, adult humor, I guess.
Yes.
But he loved humor. He loved song lyrics. because he had a finite amount of material with him, in this world where we have internet and we have accessibility now, even on airplanes.
I know.
Yeah.
That's the worst.
We're always on the radar.
Airplanes were the last sanctuary without Wi-Fi until recently.
Yeah.
I love that idea of
I ignore that it's there.
Me too. There's no way, and it would be frustratingly slow, I'm sure. But anyway, I love that idea of what was it called? The book that Dixie took with him that other people added to. Did it have a name?
He would give it a different name for different expeditions. What was one was just Dixie's Book of Inspiration. I think one of the kids wrote on it. We could do anything with it we wanted before he left. And then one of the key things was he didn't look into it before he left. So that each page was pressure. It was something to be revered. And again, that comes back to wonder and the idea, I suppose, of, people don't want to hear this, but it's so true, slowing down.
Yeah.
And appreciating one page at a time instead of mindless scrolling on their phones. Dixie's Book of Inspiration was the title I remember on the one. I'm trying to remember the other ones. I'll have to look at them.
I love that idea so much, and I think, why wouldn't we all have a little book of inspiration and allow others to also fill it in? So it's not a eulogy that we read. Well, we never get to read. It's living, and it's kind of sacred in a way, because I think we've also lost a little bit of that. Fair enough, religion no longer, or spirituality no longer plays a significant role in many people's lives, and some, of course, it does. But we've at the same time lost rituals and a sense of things being sacred, these small gestures that used to mean so much between one tribe and another, and all of these milestones throughout life. We've lost a lot of them. So creating, I don't know, it doesn't have to be a book of inspiration, but maybe it's just sending people little notes that you wouldn't otherwise, and maybe they're handwritten rather than by SMS. Not sure.
To give you an idea, I have a box downstairs in our office that contains unopened cards still from when Dixie passed away.
Wow.
There were so many that came, so many. Again, I'm so grateful. I'm not saying that to brag. It's just the quantity was so overwhelming, and the situation was so overwhelming that at a certain moment I needed to take back our space in the home, because it was beginning to feel like his death was taking over everything.
Yeah.
And so I very carefully packed up all of these beautiful gestures. And I'm almost ready now to get the box out. I know it's all there, and I'll appreciate it probably even more now, more than 2 years later, than I would have in the chaos of the moment. But people took their time, not just online or with a text message. People took their time to write physical messages to our family, showing support, showing care, expressing their own grief. Those things mean so much. So much. To know that I can just pull them out, and the act of opening an envelope and touching a card and seeing the color of ink they chose, and it's really special.
It is special.
But some people, not everyone who's missing this. This is what I wanted to say. I don't want to sound like that person who says, well, the world was better.
Yeah. Yes.
I think many people want to tap into the profound simplicity of a life well lived. And many people want to accomplish things, especially in teams. People are out there trying to get things done together, and it's not always easy. And the things you and I are talking about probably sound a bit individualistic, but they're not. I think the stronger we are as individuals, of course, the better we are for any team.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. Since we last spoke on the Resilience podcast, we ran some studies, and it turned out that the most important skill, if you can call this a skill or factor, supporting the most resilient people was, believe it or not, fulfillment. People who regularly experience a sense of fulfillment are the most resilient. And I thought that's really fascinating in terms of those who are maybe looking at the view every now and then. I often think of it in terms of when I once upon a time was climbing in the Himalayas. If you're just focusing on steps all day long, you're going to have a pretty miserable journey. If you turn around once in a while and just observe and take it all in, you realize how meaningful the journey can be, and you can apply that to anything that you're doing. But it does require you stopping and actually taking in the view.
And we can do that every single day if we build in the time for it. You know, I'm reaching that point in my life where generations are now replicating themselves. So we were very blessed. Just a few months after Dixie passed away, we became grandparents for the first time. So there's this wonderful little 2-year-old boy running around and reminding me each precious time I get to spend time with him, reminding me of just this wonderful innocence of it all. And I don't know, I feel like fulfillment comes each day. Someone like Anders, he's only 2, and so fulfillment for him might be that he was able to maybe climb a little higher on something, or could perhaps feed himself without dropping something. I don't know. There's so many little examples in a tiny person's life, but even in our lives, I remember what it was to be the mother of a 2-year-old and the stepmother with 4 kids running around, and it wasn't always easy at the end of a full day to, before I closed my eyes, think, what did I accomplish today? I think we need to sometimes, when we're surrounded by people, especially the people we're working with or the people we're living with, when the moment is there for us to help them stop and recognize their own purpose, their own accomplishments, and that helps them feel fulfilled. I think that's a beautiful gift we can give each other.
Yes.
Feedback for people is so important.
I love that so much, and I haven't thought of it from that perspective. Imagine just leaving the breadcrumbs and reminders for others to experience fulfillment. That's a real gift.
Seeing these new generations of young parents, I'll never forget the fatigue and energy required to keep up with little ones, and at the same time have your own, let's say, your own accomplishments, your own life. I was very fortunate. I was healthy as a young mother, and running was really important to me. And I only ran my first marathon after our daughter was born. She was 9 months. She was just almost 10 months old when I decided to go out there and try it. And,
wow.
It was my gift to myself. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was physically, it was fine. You know, I wasn't breaking any 2-hour marks or anything. My goal was 4 hours, and I was a little bit over 4. But it wasn't about that. It was the fact that, 1, I did it, and 2, the fulfillment of that race day for me, every kilometer, because there's 42 to think about, I tried to remind myself with each new kilometer of a day I went out and ran with all of the other during the training phase. I really wanted to remember that day in Barcelona, because it was in Barcelona, it was magical. A springtime day in Barcelona. And I gave myself each kilometer something to think about from the training period. A cold winter day that I got out there, or a day that the baby hadn't slept well and I still got out there. And And that added to the fulfillment.
Have you done any other marathons or endurance events, except, of course, polar expeditions?
Well, my polar expeditions were, I was only out there 6 weeks.
Still.
4 months and months.
Of
yeah,
course.
but I believe me, mine was quickly. For running, I don't run long distances anymore. It's what I call jogging, or just keeping it all together. I do a lot more hiking and walking. It's shocking to me now, as I'm ending my 50s, how much walking it does so much for the physicality and also the mental state. It just takes longer. But back 15, 20 years ago, I ran a total of 4 marathons and then 1 mountain race over a period of 7 or 8 years. Yeah, it's a great sport. Lovely experiences.
You're inspiring me. I've never done that. I think the furthest I've ever... This is embarrassing. I shouldn't talk about this, but I run a lot, but the furthest is probably about 15 kilometers. That's it. So I might have to push myself at some point.
Stop yourself right there.
Yeah.
But instead of saying so what I heard is I run a lot.
Yes.
So I can only imagine the consistency of what you're doing is the accomplishment. It's not
true.
about the amount of kilometers. It's looking at it as, okay, well, how many days in your life have you run out the door and accomplished that? I would never want to judge a person's running or any other sport on something like a marathon.
It's true. It's true.
It's the act of committing to getting out there. That's where fulfillment is. When we commit to getting up at 3 a.m. so that we can do a podcast, or we commit to something and then we actually do it. That's fulfillment.
That's fulfillment. I agree. Even on those days where you feel like, you know what, I can't afford this time, but you do it anyway because it's just time. And for me, it's getting to the top. There's a small mountain where I live. It's getting to the top just around sunrise or sunset and looking at that view. And I go, that's what it's all about. It's nature connectedness. Yeah. It's exercise. It's fulfillment wrapped up, and it's space, mental space to process what's been happening, which without the running, I don't think would happen. I would just have a tendency to stay focused, or at least present at the desk.
That, and also, that's probably a very important point you're touching on. I feel like we need to help people who want to be resilient, people who are listening, people who are looking for tips. There's something about embracing the monotony of daily life and allowing ourselves to find a spark in the middle of all that monotony. And instead of wasting our energy fighting the monotony or fighting the routines, finding the energy instead to create just a small spark in the middle of a routine day, and not expecting every day to be a beautiful mountaintop with a sunrise, unless you live close to one and can get to it. But perhaps encouraging people to be satisfied with perhaps something smaller, but could be just as intense.
Yeah. I think it was Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL, who says, discipline is freedom. It's like, stick to the plan, even when it's boring. And from within that structure, you will actually find moments for or wonder or whatever it might be, because you've created a structure. If it's just chaos, well, you might experience it every now and then, but chances are it won't be as often as if you have these rhythms that you can follow consistently. Being creative at the same time, and knowing that being adaptable and spontaneous can also be quite good. But I'd love to hear we touched on it just before, on realistic positivity, and people talk about Pollyanna optimism or as well as being melancholy. What is the other one? There's There's Pollyanna optimism, there's realistic optimism, and then there's a kind of melancholy optimism, I believe. But what are your thoughts on injecting realistic positivity into our lives?
Now I know that it wasn't fake all these years. I'm living now in a moment where if I were going to become a grumpy person, it would be now. It's real. It's the positivity that I feel when I feel it is real. It's not something I fake. It's not something I try to create and pretend. I'm not in denial. And I've been asked these things, or that I'm hiding the emotions of grief, or all. It's just that I knew that positivity for me was going to get me through whatever life throws at me. And I also am highly aware that I'm hopefully going to live much longer if I'm lucky. And if that happens, this is not the only difficult moment I'll face in my life. This wonderful woman, Marge, who just passed, she knew loss. She lost a child, and she lost a grandchild. She knew loss. She knew difficulty. And yet you'd still hear her singing if you ran into her unexpectedly in a grocery store. You'd hear her singing tunes from South Pacific. This was a person who still chose to exude positivity, and not only exude it, but internalize positivity, even amidst everything. So I think the Pollyanna syndrome is perhaps for some people a reality, but in my particular circumstances, it's a very real positivity. It's a positivity that coexists with the realities that happen in the world. It's about faith without a religious bind to the word faith. Just faith. Yeah. Hope. Hope is it's real. We can have hope. I know a lot of people don't have hope right now. I do. I have faith and I have hope. I believe there are so many people out there who are just waiting to become the leaders that we need at the right moment and under the right circumstances. And we see examples of this on the large scale, global scale, not so often right now, but we see them, I think, in our local and very intimate surroundings. We see these things often. People who step up and help us see that it's okay to believe that we can make things better.
Yeah, isn't it interesting to think that the next Nelson Mandela is out there? He may be 12, he may be 3, he may be about to burst onto the global scene, but those people are there, so we should support them. And I'm with you in that realistic positivity is not something to be mocked. And I've certainly had people say to me, is it real that you can always try and look at situations, or do you use a specific technique like CBT? And the answer is, for me, no. It's just something that through my own challenges, I've realized life unfolds in a better way if I have hope, as you said. That's it. Simple.
And that doesn't mean that we go through moments where anger comes out. Yeah. Or sadness comes out. They have to come out. We need to express those things. But even in the midst of the deepest amount of crying or the deepest amount of frustration, I just have this inner feeling of this is going to be okay. It's not going to maybe be exactly what I want. It's going to be okay. And that's all I hope to give to people is no matter what it is, somehow this is going to work out in some way, maybe a way you never imagined, but it's about having the faith to be able to endure the difficult moments and not be afraid of the complexities that life throws at us. I don't want especially our young people, I don't want them to be afraid. I want them to have skills that we help them learn to adapt and to bounce back and to believe in what can be. Absolutely.
You mentioned before we started this recording your time as a flight attendant, and I'd just love to hear, what did you learn from that experience?
I learned a lot about vulnerability. An airplane is this cocoon of people from all walks of life. Most of them with some amount of privilege or they wouldn't be there, but that's not always the case. I've worked flights where we're bringing people out of politically dangerous situations. So I've had refugees on board and people coming out of war zones. I've seen probably a lot. But in most contexts, an airplane is this contained amount of human energy. And all of that human energy is suddenly vulnerable to the pilots in the front and the technicians behind the building of the aircraft, the weather conditions outside, et cetera, Suddenly, control is handed over to strangers in most cases. And some humans handle vulnerability well, and others become combative or difficult, or it just depends. And so it was a challenge every time to help be a creator of a vibe that put people at ease. If I could put people at ease, I felt like I did my job. Because I was eventually going to have to tell somebody, well, we ran out of that choice, or I apologize, I don't have any more of that particular gin, or whatever. Sorry, your headphones don't work. I'll get you another pair. It's all small stuff, but that's all they have. It's all they have. And I think there's something about recognizing that everyone is in a position that they'd probably rather not be in, even the most excited person going on vacation. Not everyone's traveling for something happy. So putting people at ease, creating an atmosphere of as peaceful as possible, helping out when that crying baby is having a hard time with its ears, or maybe getting the person who drank a little bit too much in the lounge to just back now, just creating peace, if possible, was what I tried to do. And safety.
I love that. It's kind of what the world needs, really, is a little bit more of that. It's like we're all on an aircraft or a spaceship hurtling around a ball of fire, and a little bit more peace and tolerance and care is kind of needed.
It sounds, I'm sitting here alone. There's not one impulse hitting me right now that's interfering with my clarity. I'm not trying to make it all sound too easy at all.
Of course.
I remember what it's like to have delays, and people are going to miss connections.
Of course.
And, very important events are going to be missed. I have been in terrible weather conditions, awful turbulence. I know the stressors that keep us from feeling like we're performing our best. But if I really look back, I probably performed my best under those conditions. I didn't enjoy it maybe as much, but I found that the more challenging the conditions come later, I was probably more proud of, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And that leads to that fulfillment again. The greater the challenge, how did you perform? Were you available to others? Did you react or respond? And ultimately that leads us to that feeling like, well, that was meaningful. I can't imagine the responsibility you have in those situations. Well, our time is nearly up. I don't want to keep you too long because for those who are listening, you had an early start, 4 a.m. to begin this recording. So thank you so much, Julie. Any final thoughts for people out there in the world who are looking for a little bit of inspiration? You've given so much already in the conversation today, but any final thoughts?
I think the most important thing is get moving. Get moving. There's so much to do. there's so much that we can do with our humble little two hands and our 2 feet. We have the ability to make an impact. Not all of us are going to be written about in history books. Not all of us are going to get the awards that companies give out or that sports teams receive. Mm-hmm. But there are so many important tasks to accomplish, and so get moving. And within that movement, make it purposeful. Not frenetic movement, mm-hmm. not mindless movement. So get moving and make impact in a mindful way.
Thank you so much. You've given us so many gems
Thank
today.
You, Brad.
I'm looking forward to listening to this session myself, and I hope we get to do this again soon. Thank you, Julie. And for everyone who would like to connect, please do click on the links to Polar Experiences, and it's all in the show notes below.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you, Brad. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Until next time, we'll see you soon.